Hello and welcome to this lecture where we're going to dive a little bit deeper into learning SQLite. We want to make sure you got a good grasp on what's going on here, and I want to show you some extra tools that you can use. So the first order of business here is, I know we just worked to create this whole database that works with events. I want you to now manipulate this code so that it creates the database called users and then switches back to users. Okay, so go ahead, take a second, update this to be working with users now. All right, so hopefully that went well for you. We wanted to update this to say this new database is going to be users. I guess it's not new. We've already created this before. And again, we're going to update this to say users, and we had chose to have name and age for our two options. So we'll go ahead and put back something like Nick here, and let's go ahead and do something maybe like Dave here. We'll have Dave be 14. So rather than, working with the events table, we want that to be users here. Also want this to be users. Instead of year, we want that to be age. So we're gonna have to switch that to age. And let's see, name, age, yeah, that's looking pretty good from users. Then when we come down here, we're gonna call this user results, and we want this to be updated to be age. And that will be age index. Excellent. So that should be working. Let's go ahead and give that a run. Make sure it's exactly what we're hoping for there. But yeah, we want to bring this back to users so I can show you how to do a few more sort of awesome examples here. Okay. So we'll go ahead and give this a second to run. Again, want this to pop up on the emulator, although we're just going to be looking at logcat. So we'll go ahead and get that fired up there. Okay, so here comes the app, and yep, still waiting here. Come on, Android Studio, we believe in you. Come on. All right, while this is going, I'm going to teach you just a little something here. So the next thing that I want to talk about is how you can specifically query from a database. You don't have to do a big general, like just go ahead and get all the users. You can say, hey, no, only give me this amount of people or people that are related to this thing. So for example, with people's age, we could say, you know what, we only want you to get the adults from the database, meaning we only want you to go get people who are older than age 18. And just real quick here, I want to show, looks like the app opened up and look, it printed out all these people, Nick, Sean, Nick, Dave. So we don't need to insert any more people into our database. So we're going to comment that out for a second. But again, getting back to what I was just talking about, if we want to get only users who are above age 18, after we create our query where we say select star, select everything from users, we can say capital where and add some sort of qualifier to say, get all the people where, meaning all the people that, for example, are older than 18. If we want to do that, we would said age greater than 18. So this will give us all the adults. And if we go back to our logcat here, looks like everyone here is an adult except for our very last one, Dave. So we should see Nick and Sean showing up, but no 14-year-old Dave. So let's go ahead and run this one more time. Hopefully we should see a little bit more of a quicker turnaround here with the emulator now that we got that running for the first time. And look at that. This is going much faster. So look at this. It comes through, and let's go check what we get. Look at that. We got Nick, Sean, Nick, but no Dave, age 14. And conversely, if we said give us everyone under the age of 18, if we go ahead and change that, we should only have Dave coming back from that situation. So let's go ahead and confirm that that's the case. And when we do this, let's scroll up there and look at that. We only get back Dave. So this is how you can kind of be little bit more selective about this. And you may be wondering, could I just do select star from users and then here inside of this while loop kind of do a check to say, oh, only if they're age older than 18 do I want to use them or something like that. You can, but doing these query with these specific where tags, it's so much more efficient than looping through on your own. The SQLite database has its own code written to do things like that, and it just go so much faster than if you tried this on your own, especially when you have like thousands or millions of records. It would be able to handle that much better. So not only can you take an integer and see, if it's greater or less than that, other things that you can do, for example, is we could check the name and say, go ahead and just give us everyone that has the name Nick. So with SQL, you only have to do one single equal sign there, where in Java if statements, you have to do two equal sign, but you just have the one. For example, let's do capital Nick, and let's see if that gives us back all the users named Nick. So we'll go ahead and run this and wait for our app here. Boom. Come look at that. And look, we have 3 Nicks inside of the database. That's kind of crazy that happened. So here to kind of just prove something real quick, let's add one more Nick to the database, but let's add maybe a Nick that's like 23. And let's add a Nick to the database that's like 43. Okay. So we're going to add a Nick that's 23 and a Nick that's 43. And then we have these Nicks who are 28. So let's say we wanted to find all the Nicks who were, had the name Nick, but then also were equal to the age of 43, for example. Like we're trying to just get that specific one. Well, we could say where name is equal to Nick, and then if we do all caps and, we could set another sort of conditional element where we could say age is equal to 43. So now if we go ahead and run this, we're saying give us all the users where the name's equal to Nick and the age is equal to 43. That's kind of nice how that reads out like English, right? Give us all users where the name is equal to Nick and the age is 43. So if we do that, we should only get that one. If we wanted to be, a little trickier, we could say where, someone's age is less than 30. For example, if we do this, it should give us all the 28-year-old Nicks and the 23-year-old Nick. That would be pretty cool to see. So let's go ahead and run that real quick. All right, here comes the code. And look at that. We get all the 28 and the 23-year-old Nick. And realized we're running this code again and again. So we're just adding more Nicks into the database. There's probably too many Nicks at this point. Okay. Other things that you can do is, let's say, I believe we had, the database was full of Nick, Sean's, and Dave's. Other things that you can do is you can find users inside of the database and say, like, if you just want to check people whose names start with a particular letter. So you could say where name capital like, and then you could say something like in single quotes n percentage signs, and that says get everyone whose name starts with an N. So we only have Nicks inside of the database, so this one won't be as exciting, but you will see everyone whose name starts with an N, which again in this case is only Nick, but it goes ahead and it grabs all of them. Now something else that you can do with this like is you could say, I just want anyone that has like an A in their name. So I think this should get Dave and Sean that we had earlier. So if you do percentage sign A percentage sign, that's saying anyone that has anything before and anything after an A, go find that person inside of the database. So let's go ahead and run this. Again, looking for Sean and Dave to show up with this kind of query. So we go ahead and we hit run on that. And if we scroll up to the top there, look at that. We get both Sean's and Dave's there. So something that you do want to do whenever you're searching for users like this in a query, you always want to, after you specify your where, to say if you're looking for one particular person, you would want to say limit 1. And the reason for this is that, sometimes you're going to get back multiple people. And if you're looking to delete that particular user or do something with them, if you get back multiple ones, sometimes you can have an issue. So you don't always have to do a limit 1, but if you're trying to delete a particular user or do something, it's good to have that limit 1 to make sure you don't, by accident, write some query that actually gets everyone from the database and then, deletes every single person or something like that. So that can be a good check for you when you're trying to run things. So with all of this, let's go ahead and talk about how we can delete someone from the database. So let's go ahead and just move this back to select star from users. We just want every user there. And I'm going to show you how you can do one of these deletions. So we're going to take this SQLite database, and we're going to do .execute SQL. And this is how you delete a particular, in this case, user from the users table. You can do all caps, delete space from lowercase users, that's the name of our table. Then we'll say capital where, and then after that we're going to say name equal to, and let's get rid of one of these nicks, for example. And I don't want double quotes, I want single quotes. So we'll do where name is equal to nick. Now, if we just left this as is, this would delete all the nicks from the database. But if we wanted to delete only one, this is where we'd want to say limit 1, right? So let's go ahead and provide that. We're saying limit 1, but you'll notice that we do get a bit of an error here. And the situation is that when you're deleting something, you can't say limit 1. You have to delete all or nothing, which kind of leaves a strange situation. So I'm going to tell you how to fix that in a second. But since we can only delete one of the nicks, let's go ahead and delete our one Dave. So we're just going to say, hey, if your name's equal to Dave, we're going to delete you. So let's go ahead and run this. And we should see that Dave will no longer be in there because we'll delete him here. And then the next line will say, hey, go grab all the users. So if we do that, look at that, we only have Nick and Sean showing up, okay? Now the next step for us is, we would want to delete all just like one particular Nick. And if we do want to do that, we have to update our table a little bit. So in order to do this, let's go ahead and give ourselves some space. We have to add an extra property to this table, an extra column called the ID, which is going to be something called a primary key, which basically allows you to give a unique number to everyone that's inside of the row. And it allows you to say, oh, even though there's two Nicks who are age 28, they look identical, they have different IDs, so I can differentiate between the two. So we're going to update here a little bit. We're going to keep the database called users, but we're going to make a new table that we are going to call new users, just like that. And we're going to keep the name varchar, we're going to keep the year int, but we're going to add one new property here, one new column called ID, and it is going to be of type capital integer. So just go ahead and type that out. And we're also going to say space primary space key. So it's saying this last column here, ID, it's going to be an integer, and you notice we don't do int with a number in there, we're just saying an integer, which I can't remember what the default size of that is, but I think it's enough to handle up to, well, I'd guess at least to the hundreds of thousands place. But since we're making this a primary key, this is going to automatically count this ID value for us. So moving forward through here, I'm going to go ahead and uncomment these lines. So these will still go ahead and create, and I'm going to comment out the delete one. These will still go ahead and insert new users, and you can see we don't specify like, oh, I want ID to be equal to like 5 or something like that. No, we want this to just automatically pick the IDs for us. And SQLite is smart enough to say, hey, if they want a primary key, I'll just automatically increment that as I'm supposed to, and then just sort of move forward with the rest of that code. So if we're going to have this new ID, we should be able to see it. So we're going to make a new int here called ID index. We're going to have this be equal to c.get column index for ID. Excellent. And then we can go ahead and print out the ID as well. So we'll paste that in. We're going to change that to say ID, and this should be ID index. All right, so with this all in place, this is a completely new table. So these are going to be the only 3 users that are going to be inside of this new table in an existing database, but new table. So we're going to go ahead and hit run on this. And we should see all of them printed out with their proper IDs there. So let's go ahead and see what we get. Okay, we'll open up Logcat here. And if we scroll up to the top here, oh, failed to read row. This is because I have not updated this to be new users. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's try running one more time. So I had us doing the query where we were selecting from users. Oh, and I'm trying to add these new user objects into the users array. I want this to be the new capital users. So I'm going to have to copy and paste and update that. This is where SQL gets tricky because it's all just sort of these strings and you have to make sure that it all works. And, you know, Java doesn't really have a good way to check to say, oh, did you mean new users here, right? Like, we kind of have to be on top of things. But finally got things in place, and oh my goodness, we still don't have, and this is because when I created new users, it was supposed to, I should change this to age instead of year. So let me go ahead and switch that back. And so maybe I'm going to have to call this something besides new users. Well, let's just see. Yeah, let's call this maybe the new users because we really whiffed on that one. So we'll go ahead and paste this in. All right. And let's try this now with the table called the new users. They've got a name, age, and an ID. And this should work finally this time. So let's see, app comes down, and look at that. It took 3 or 4 tries there, but we finally got it. So there's Nick, who's 23, Nick, who's 43, and Dave, who's 14, right? Those are the 3 users that we inserted. But look, one has an ID of 1, one has an ID of 2, one has an ID of 3. And if we were to run this one more time, this Nick would have an ID of 4, 5, and 6, and there'd be a total of 6 users inside of that database. So I'm going to comment out these insert lines just for a moment here because I want to show you now with an ID. Let's say, you know what, I've got 2 Nicks in the database and I want to get rid of one of them. You know, and I want to get rid of this Nick who's 43. I can just now say on this SQLite query or this command, I can say delete from users where, and I now just say ID is equal to, and if it's this Nick who's 43 that I want to get rid of, I just put where ID is equal to 2, and that's going to automatically get rid of that specific Nick. So let's go ahead and run this, make sure that that is the case. Okay, app opens up, and if we scroll, no such column ID. Well, that is what I had named it. Oh, and look at that, because I'm still using the wrong one. I have to call the table the new users. All right. You can see I'm not perfect with this SQL stuff. It's, you know, I really like Java in that when you use variable names, like it checks to make sure you're kind of using the right stuff. But this SQL stuff is a little bit of the wild, wild west. So we open this up and look at that. It has Nick who's 23 with an ID of 1 and Dave who's 14 whose ID is 3. And the middle Nick is just gone completely. So there you got it. A little bit more detailed information into this advanced SQLite stuff. Now that you got a good grasp on this, I think we're ready to move forward. So let's talk about it in the next lecture.